From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. Hey, James, I'm glad we're back, and we're having an interesting and fun guest to join us today.
I look forward connecting and talking with our guests. We got to meet at Infocom, and now it's great to bring them on and learn from them.
So with that, I want to welcome Mike Krejci from CTI. Hey, Mike, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Steve, thanks for having me. It's nice to meet in the virtual world and actually meet in the real world at Infocom a couple weeks ago, and then be back here in the virtual world talking with you and James again. It's good to be here.
Thanks. It was really cool. We kind of had like a little reunion, and we three of us spend a good amount of time together. And James and I, in the last episode, talked a little bit about our Infocom experience, and we just felt that there was a lot that programmers can gain from going to events and shows, even though that may not be a natural thing, or it's not the role that you always think of to be getting out there. From your perspective, first, thanks for listening to our show, because I know that you've also reached out to us and provided feedback in the past. What actually is important to you in terms of being able to network and be around other programmers?
One of the things you guys have talked about a lot is being that man on an island. And, we're in a niche industry that's pretty small and close knit. And I think the programmers in our industry are even in a smaller group, right? And so any communication we can have with our counterparts that are doing the same thing we're doing in the trenches helps out. If you look in the traditional software development, they have Stack Overflow, they've got plenty of sharing of knowledge. And I think traditionally AV programming has kept everything close to the chest. So trying to get that into more of a social collaborative environment. At the end of the day, we're all turning on and off TVs, right? We're doing the same programming at the end. How we get there, the elaborativeness of it is different, but me, James, you, Steve, we're all turning on and off TVs. We're all controlling audio levels, on some scale. So we should be able to share our knowledge and share our war stories.
So James, you had mentioned this recently as well, that putting yourself out there and making these types of connections is important. Why don't you elaborate a little bit too on what Mike was saying in terms of how you've gained from talking with other people? Like, is it about learning styles and tips, or just being able to commiserate around problems and challenges, or just knowing that, I think we should probably rename this podcast Person on an Island, because we talk about it so often, but we all are kind of very independent in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, we are independent. I think the biggest feature I get from it is, like I said, get out of your shell, connect with people, because even just talking out loud with someone who understands what you're doing can be beneficial. They don't even have to respond. Just talking out loud, knowing that the person's listening and understanding what you're saying, brings you to a point where you'd be like, okay, now I'm good. I just need to hear it out loud. Because you start talking yourself, people look at you funny.
It depends, but yes, either that or they leave you alone, right? Yes. Mike, you're kind of in a interesting spot, because not only do you have the responsibility of being a programmer, a software developer, but you also have you oversee a lot of developers. How are you able to do that amongst your team and try to create that camaraderie? Because you could almost have like a mini like networking group, amongst all of the programmers, because not all of them are even located in the same place.
Right. With, we've got 27 offices scattered from Seattle in the US down to Atlanta. So, we cross the whole country. I've got probably 40 people in the company that can program to some aspect. So, getting those 40 people even into the same Zoom meeting is like wrangling cats. And we're a group of introverts, naturally as programmers. So getting people to speak up is one of our major objectives in our monthly meeting. Is not necessarily to pass information down to those guys, but have them speak up to us. What are you doing? What cool did you do? What interesting thing did you do in the last month? What problems did you have? So that way we're getting that communication flowing by force almost.
That's it's very valuable, I'm sure. And I can only imagine what it's like, because that's a lot of people. James and I were chatting a little bit, like you're the size of your programming group is the size of some companies. So it's quite the undertaking, and I'm sure that there needs to be consistency, and there also needs to be a way for people to work with each other's codes and styles and just personalities. So there's a lot that goes into that, I would imagine. You had mentioned too, just about sharing, and I know that that's sometimes something that it can be hard for people. Do you feel like your team naturally wants to help each other get better and improve?
I agree. Most of our people do try and share, try and help out based on the monthly meetings, based on some communication we have, is we know who's good at what things. We know who's done a lot of the Cisco rooms. We know a lot of people who've done at Lona control systems or some of those oddities. So we can go, oh, I know Matt's done this. Let me call up Matt. And, he'll drop what he's doing, help us out. Any of the guys do that. And it's a real collaborative effort most of the time. Now there's some people that keep some things close to the chest, and it's the way it's going to be no matter what. But for the most part, really is a good collaborative sharing environment with us.
Do you have any tools or anything that you can recommend for people that you use, or some ways that's something like that is really fostered?
We've really come to use Microsoft Teams. We have a Teams group with everyone in it, and it's just through habit of going, if you have a problem, reach out there first. Everyone's sitting at a laptop, but as a programmer, whether it's in the field, whether you're at your desk, it pings your phone, your tablet, your alarm clock next to your bed, everything else that Microsoft has weaned their way into. So it's posted there when you have a challenge, posted there when you find something that's a quirk and that you've solved, when you find a module from a manufacturer that needs fixing, posted in there so we can all get to that information. So if you struggled on it for 4 hours today, maybe that'll save somebody else from having to struggle on it for 4 hours the next day, the next week, the next month, because we can go find that, we can go search it. And Teams has really been great for us. Before we had Teams, we weren't nearly as communicative.
Go ahead, James.
Oh, that sounds really interesting, and a good way of sharing. I know we do that with our higher ed Slack group, not just code wise, but sharing wise. But my question to you there, Mike, then is, how is that? I don't use Teams that much, so this is might be a dumb or a uneducated question of, what if you add a new programmer to your team? Can they access all that?
Yep. So once we add, new employee starts, we bring them in, we add them into the team, and then they get the whole history. So they can go in and search, okay. Let's say the issue is BiAmp VoIP. They search BiAmp VoIP and they find where I posted, hey, there's an issue here, and they can solve it. If there's a, We have examples of code out there. We've got all kinds of stuff out there, contact information. So
That's good.
Wow, all in teams, huh?
Yeah.
That's really great.
It's been great because it's one central location for us, and you don't have to go, oh, for this information, you go here. For this information, you go to the knowledge base. This one, you go here. We've created wikis and calendars and resources all in one spot for everyone to quickly grab and find.
Nice.
That's fantastic. I would imagine that there's also a learning curve too in trying to kind of get everybody in the company buying into thinking the same way. Do you have any tips for others who are trying to train their teams? Teams being team of programmers, not teams, the software.
I think the biggest thing is just, leading by example, working with, some of the guys that are newer and working with them on how they can get better, how they can, what you would do in a situation to show them ways to improve. And no one's going to write my programs tomorrow. They're not going to switch from one way to another way overnight. So little small changes progressively is, I think, the best way to do it. Hey, you've been using this way to write your page flip logic. Yeah, that works and it's worked for you in the past, but really we want to go to this method. Let's work on that. Let's try and do that. Give it a shot. Okay, now you've done that. Now let's try and fix the next thing.
That's a good, interesting way of taking it.
So we talked a little bit in the past about trainings and how it's important to be able to just get the knowledge that you need rather than the knowledge that somebody wants to tell you. And James and I were kind of commenting about how it's great to be able to learn from peers and when somebody is presenting that you can relate to, that when you're the subject matter expert, you're only need to know a little bit more than everybody else in the room. Do you feel like it's important for you to encourage your team and even yourself to kind of step up and do those types of things, not only within the organization, but educating the industry?
Definitely in our organization, education is one of our, leadership's, big pushes. Is we have our own LMS platform that we use to get information out to people. And so whether it's, me presenting content, one of our other experts in the company, or it's a manufacturer, we try and get that information out there and then try and get it out to, whether it's the programmers, the engineers, the technicians, the salespeople, try and get that information down to them in a way that's both entertaining, but also knowledgeable, and without being 8 hours of their time to go do it. And that's really what we found best, is trying to get it to all the people, is go, Mr. Salesman, here's how Zoom works. This is how we can do a control system with it. The programmers are educating the other departments to assist with them on the front end of the sale. And
yeah, that's really cool. It really is.
Yeah, very. That's a nice way of approaching it. Now, is this all internal, or have you gone external and, kind of like Steve, and done classes outside where you present to at webinars or conferences?
Me personally, it has mostly been internal for that. We do have a YouTube channel, shameless plug, and we've done a CTI tips video series, which has mostly been install focused. But we did simple topics for technicians, how to install drywall anchors, how to use Phoenix connectors, and some of those simple things that necessarily a tech might not know out of the box day one.
So I guess as we wrap up this episode, and we'll definitely going to want to talk with you some more. What do you think the advice you can give us, or what's something that we should be doing with this podcast, or how can we help programmers more in trying to cultivate the community, but also make this continuously valuable?
Yeah, and I think what you guys do here, what you do with State of Control, Steve, on AV Nation, what the Yahoo groups did back in the day, what
Yeah, you
Discord,
go far back, huh?
Wow. Yeah.
the Crestron Discord group, the Facebook groups, the Reddit groups. I think they're all great avenues for us to programmers to share our knowledge and trade stories and not be the only one on an island, but be able to send out an SOS and find somebody else who's out there. I pulled something off a developer group today where I was stuck on something. So, I think we're a bunch of introverts, but these little digital platforms all help us share, all help us learn. So even if, a programmer isn't on here, with you and James, but actually listening, I think they're gaining something, and that's making us all better, I think.
I appreciate that. One thing that we're trying to figure out is how can we create more visibility for these types of things. James, anything you want to wrap up with?
Just kind of going with what you just left off there with the visibility. Like, Mike, how did you find about us? And do you have any suggestions of avenues that Steve and I can do to try to get more visibility and bring resources to people who may not know?
So I think I found Ask the Programmer through Twitter, through both of you guys. I think that's where it was led, someone retweeting it, something to that effect. But I think getting out there in those groups, right, because there's communities out there, is something to tie those groups all together. Plug this show on the Discord group, on one of the Facebook groups. Try and share the connection between the two. Going, hey, look over there is I think the way to get it out.
Good, thank you.
James, I'll let you kind of wrap up, and then we'll let people know how to get in touch with you, and we'll do the same with Mike.
Yeah. Well, first off, thank Mike for coming on and joining us. And for anyone who wants to connect, on Twitter, AV_James King. I'm on LinkedIn, James King, but I don't use that as much. I do write for the Higher Ed Digital Magazine, the IT and AV column, and we're on this weekly podcast.
And Mike Krejci from CTI, thanks so much for being part of this and being with us. If people want to get in touch with you and learn more about CTI, or even what you're doing personally, how can they do so?
Yep. Thanks, Steve, for having me. If you want to go to cti.com, it's everything you can find about Conference Technologies and all of our subsidiaries. Twitter and LinkedIn, it's at the Mike Krejci, just like it's spelled. So yeah, hit me up there. And thanks, guys, for having me. It was really a pleasure being here, and look forward to the next one.
Absolutely. We really appreciate it. It was fun hanging out together, and we got to do that more often. For me, you could reach me at Steve Greenblatt on most social media platforms. Twitter and LinkedIn are probably where I'm most active. But we're going to start to get involved in some more of these groups, because I think Mike had a good idea there. So if you are part of those groups, please help us to share the show and help get the word out, because that's what it's all about. If the group comes together and we find more intermingling, it can only be beneficial. So check us out so far on YouTube and Google and Apple Podcasts. Please leave a rating, a review, a comment, and just let us know what you want to hear about. But thanks for listening. And this has been Ask the Programmer.